I'm Marcel Levy. I'm an internist hematologist from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Also been working in London at University College London in the past few years. I've been knowing Jan Wouter ten Cate for more than 40 years of my life. He was actually there right at the start of the beginning of my career. I was still a second-year medical student. He picked me up after a lecture he was given on venous thrombosis. And after that, we worked together for a very, very long time. Jan Wouter ten Cate has been doing research for decades in the field of hemostasis and thrombosis. Initially working on platelets. He also worked a lot with hemophilia patients, but I think he became really famous for his work on venous thrombosis and venous thromboembolism, diagnosis, treatment, and so forth. And I think he was one of the leaders of clinical research in that area, beginning in the 80s of the previous century up until now. Ten Cate introduced clinical epidemiology in the field of hemostasis and thrombosis, at least in Europe. There was a tradition doing that from McMaster. He was intrigued by that, by people like Jack Hirsch and Russell Hull, and he picked it up. And then he introduced those techniques to come to a proper diagnosis of venous thrombosis, in the beginning by plethysmography, which is a very complex and elaborate technique, but later on by things like ultrasound that we're now doing all the time, and how to make a proper diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. And when the diagnostic management of these diseases was solved, he moved to treatment. And he introduced low molecular weight heparin as a treatment option for those diseases. GW, as we all call him, was one of the most fantastic mentors you can think of. He was my promoter, but he was also my supporter. He was my coach. He was indeed my mentor, and not only of me, of many, many young people in the field of hemostasis and thrombosis. And more than 25 of those have become professor in the field of hemostasis and thrombosis. And they all trained with him. They all did their PhD with him, and they ended up having a career in this field as well. He was a very warm, very effective mentor, coach. He would give you a lot of space, a lot of trust, and people really liked that. The freedom that they were given by this famous professor who treated them, even when you were still a medical student, as a colleague. GW was an extremely unconventional person. He was very original. He didn't like official stuff. He hardly ever wore a tie. He was very accessible to everyone, always laughing, always making jokes, always wanted to party. And that made him a very, also, apart from being a fantastic researcher, also a very socially intelligent person.